Hello, my name is Justin Rivera. I am currently 31 years old. 4 years ago, I was a salesman at a small electronics store in Houston, Texas. Calling myself a salesman sounds a bit fancy. In reality, I'm just the guy behind the counter day after day, introducing toasters, microwaves, or outdated TVs to hurried customers. I don't live in a lavish mansion overlooking a blazing red desert, nor am I a gaunt writer chasing big dreams in a cramped apartment. I'm just an ordinary person living an ordinary life in a city full of sun and dust. But if you think that's all there is to my life, you haven't heard about the scars I carry in my heart. Scars that never heal, etched deep by the very people I once called family. Houston is not a strange city to me. I was born and raised here in a middle-class neighborhood with red brick houses, white picket fences, and neatly trimmed lawns. From the outside, my family seemed like the perfect model. My father, Richard Rivera, is a retired chief accountant who always took pride in the precision of his numbers. My mother, Clara, was a literature teacher, but she preferred boasting about her successful children over talking about Shakespeare. Our family consists of 4 siblings. My older brother Michael, a prestigious lawyer in Dallas, my older sister Sophia, a neurosurgeon in Austin, and my younger sister Lily, an outstanding student who graduated with a degree in chemical engineering from MIT. And me? I'm Justin, the one with no future, as my mother once called me. My family has a tradition of pursuing intellectual careers. My parents always emphasized that education was the key, the only ticket to escape what they called a mediocre life. Michael, Sophia, and Lily were the shining stars in my parents' eyes. Michael with his high-profile lawsuits, Sophia with her life-saving surgeries, and Lily, my brilliant little sister, always praised for her bright future. I don't blame them. They deserved the praise. But I was different. I never fit into the perfect picture my family painted. I'm not lazy. I went to college majoring in business, but I didn't graduate with honors or prestigious scholarships. I left school with an average degree, some student debt, and a part-time job at this electronics store. That's where I've been for the past 8 years. The job isn't bad, but it's not something you can proudly boast about at family gatherings, especially when your family only wants to talk about million-dollar contracts or academic awards. Justin, how many toasters did you sell this week? Michael once asked, half joking, half serious, at a Christmas party. The whole family burst into laughter as if it was the funniest story they'd ever heard. I forced a smile, swallowing the humiliation, but deep down I felt like I'd been stabbed. It wasn't Michael's words that hurt the most. It was the look in my parents' eyes, a look that didn't bother hiding their disappointment. They never said it outright, but I knew what they thought. Justin is the failure of this family. My mother was the most blunt. One time when I was 27 during a rare family dinner, she looked at me and said, her voice cold as ice, "You should know your place and be grateful you're still allowed to eat in this house." Those words hit me like a slap in the face. I sat there, surrounded by the delicious food my mother had prepared amidst the laughter and chatter of my siblings, feeling like an outsider. I didn't belong in that place, in that family. But the moment that truly broke me was last summer at Lily's graduation party. The whole family gathered in our spacious living room decorated with balloons and fresh flowers. Lily, my little sister whom I've always adored, stood at the center, radiant in her white dress, holding her prestigious MIT degree. My parents couldn't stop bragging about her, about how she'd been recruited by 3 major companies with 6-figure salaries. The guests, relatives, and my parents' friends all nodded in approval. I stood in a corner of the room holding a glass of wine, trying to blend into the festive atmosphere. But as usual, people's eyes started turning toward me, not with admiration, but with curiosity mixed with pity. "So what about Justin?" a distant aunt asked, her tone suggesting she was fishing for an interesting story. "Are you still working at that electronics store?" I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yes, it's going fine." "Fine?" Michael interjected, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "He's the king of toasters in Houston, right, Justin?" The room erupted in laughter again. That laughter felt like tiny knives stabbing at my heart repeatedly. I looked at my parents, hoping for a glance of support, a word of defense, but my father just took a sip of his wine, and my mother turned away, pretending to be busy rearranging the food platters. Lily, the sister I thought I was closest to, only gave a faint smile as if she didn't want to upset our older brother. That night, after the party ended, I stood alone on the porch, watching the twinkling lights of the neighborhood. Houston at night is beautiful, but I felt like a ghost. I didn't belong here. I didn't belong with these people. I had tried, hoped, and waited for the day my family would see me differently. But I realized they never would. To them, I would always be the one with no future. I went back inside, grabbed my car keys, and drove off into the night. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed to get away, not just from the party, but from everything, this house, this family, the mocking words, and the disdainful looks. I stopped my car on a quiet road, sat in the darkness, and let silent tears fall. I wasn't crying out of sadness. I was crying out of anger, out of helplessness, out of the realization that I had let my own family define my worth for far too long. That night, I made a decision. I would leave Houston. I would cut off all contact with my family. I would start over, not to prove to them who I am, but to prove it to myself. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew one thing. I couldn't keep living in the shadow of their contempt. The next morning, I packed my things. It wasn't much. A few clothes, an old laptop, and some savings. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't write a letter. I just left quietly like a ghost slipping out of the Rivera family's perfect picture. My destination was Florida, a strange place where I hoped to find myself. As my moving truck rolled down the highway, leaving Houston behind, I glanced at the city in the rearview mirror. The skyscrapers, the familiar roads, they grew smaller and then vanished. I don't know if I'll ever return to this place, but I do know one thing. I will never again let anyone, not even my family, make me feel worthless. I drove across the state line, the blazing Florida sunshine hitting my eyes so bright it made me squint. It was my first day setting foot in Orlando, with little more than a suitcase of clothes, an old laptop, and a heart full of scars. Houston was now just a distant memory, fading like the streetlights in my rearview mirror. I had no clear plan, no friends, no family here. Only one thing, a determination not to let my past define me for even a second longer. Orlando was nothing like Houston. This city was vibrant, bursting with the energy of theme parks, palm-lined streets, and grand dreams. But for me, it was just a place to start over. I rented a small apartment, the cheapest I could find, with stained walls and a faint, musty smell. The bed was an old mattress, the desk a folding table bought from a thrift store. I didn't complain. Compared to the disdainful looks back home, this cramped space was paradise. The first job I found in Florida was as a low-level real estate sales agent for a small company called Sunshine Properties. It wasn't a dream job, but it wasn't bad for a fresh start in a strange place. I roamed neighborhoods, handed out flyers, called potential clients, and tried to convince them to buy houses I couldn't even afford to rent myself. The pay was low, the commissions meager, but I didn't care. Every workday was a reminder to myself, you're not the failure they think you are. The early days at Sunshine Properties weren't easy. I remember my first time standing in front of a client, a young couple looking for a vacation home. I stammered, forgot the numbers for square footage and interest rates, and my hands shook so much I dropped a stack of papers on the floor. They looked at me, not with sympathy but with doubt. "Are you sure you can handle this?" the husband asked, his tone eerily similar to Michael's mocking voice. I just nodded, swallowing my embarrassment, and told myself, "You have to do this, Justin. There's no going back." I started learning. Not the kind of learning from textbooks like in college, but learning from my own failures. I spent hours every night reading about real estate, from house pricing to market trends. I watched YouTube videos, listened to podcasts by successful brokers, and jotted down every little tip. I learned how to speak more confidently, how to look clients in the eye without flinching, how to turn a rejection into an opportunity. I began to understand that in this industry, it's not about who you are, but what value you bring. Alongside my job, I decided to try my hand at social media. I wasn't the type to show off, but I realized that if I wanted to succeed, I needed to build my personal brand. I created a TikTok account, posting short videos sharing home buying tips, market analysis, or just stories about my workday. At first, my videos only got a handful of views, mostly from old friends in Houston, probably curious to see what the toaster salesman was up to. But I didn't give up. I learned how to edit videos, choose background music, and speak in a way that captivated viewers. Slowly, the numbers started to change. 10 views became 100, then 1,000. A video about 5 mistakes to avoid when buying your first home unexpectedly got over 50,000 views. I couldn't believe my eyes. Those videos didn't just bring followers, they brought clients. One day, I received a message from a stranger on Instagram. "I saw your video on TikTok," they wrote. "Can you help me find an apartment in Orlando?" That was the first time I realized the power of building a personal brand. From then on, I worked harder, not just at Sunshine Properties, but also on my own image. I started getting invited to real estate events, meeting investors, and even appeared in a small local newspaper interview. They called me a promising young broker. I just smiled, but deep down I knew I was on the right path. The big break came one scorching afternoon when a major client contacted me. He was an investor from New York, looking to buy a plot of land in Orlando's suburbs to develop into a resort. I had no experience with million-dollar deals, but I didn't let that stop me. I researched day and night, preparing everything meticulously, from zoning maps to profit forecasts. On the day of the contract signing, I stood in front of him wearing a cheap borrowed suit and presented as if my entire life depended on that moment. When he nodded and signed the contract, I felt my heart stop. That deal earned me my first 6-figure commission. I used that money to invest, not in fancy cars or luxury homes, but in another plot of land in Orlando. I researched thoroughly, relying on everything I'd learned, and bet everything on that decision. 3 months later, a major corporation bought the land for double the price. For the first time in my life, I looked at my bank account and saw a balance in the hundreds of thousands. I sat in my tiny apartment, staring at the laptop screen, and cried, not because of the money, but because I realized I had achieved something my family said I never could. But I didn't let success make me arrogant. I still lived simply, wore ordinary clothes, and cooked my own meals. I didn't need to show off because I wasn't doing this to prove anything to anyone but myself. However, there was one thing I always held close, a special gift for my father. Despite his cold and harsh demeanor, my father had once shared his dream with us to own a Lamborghini. "Before I die, I want to drive a supercar just once," he'd said, his eyes unusually dreamy. I decided to save up to buy him that car for his 65th birthday. I even turned down a few lucrative investment opportunities to set aside money for this gift. I don't know why I did it. Maybe deep down I still hoped that one day my family would see me differently. 3 years have passed in Florida and I haven't contacted my family. My mother and sister sent a few messages, but I only replied briefly saying I was rebuilding my life in Florida. I feel like I've vanished from their lives, and maybe to them it doesn't matter, but I don't mind. I'm busy building my new life, busy becoming the best version of myself. Houston is now just a distant memory to me, like a hazy dream I'm not sure I want to recall. Then one early autumn day, as I sat in my small office in Orlando, the sunlight streaming through the window warming my hands, a message arrived. It was from my father. "This year is my 65th birthday. The whole family will be gathering. If you're free, come back." At the end, he wrote, "But it's better if you don't to avoid embarrassment." I stared at the phone screen, my heart tightening. Those words, though just text on a screen, cut like a knife, reopening old scars I thought I'd forgotten. To avoid embarrassment. I could hear my father's voice, cold and tinged with sarcasm, as if my presence itself was a source of shame. Part of me wanted to delete the message and continue the life I'd built in Florida. But another part, the weaker part, the part that still yearned for my family's approval, wouldn't let me. For 3 years I had been preparing for a special gift, a metallic silver Lamborghini, my father's lifelong dream. I had worked tirelessly, turning down lucrative investment opportunities just to save up for that car. Not because I wanted to show off, but because I hoped just once my father would look at me with different eyes, eyes filled with pride, with respect. I knew it was a naive dream, but it was the only thing keeping me tethered to my family, however fragile that thread was. The day I went to buy the Lamborghini, the Orlando sky was clear, not a cloud in sight. I drove my old car to a luxury dealership in the city center, a gleaming glass building with cars displayed like works of art. I walked in, wearing a simple button-up shirt and jeans, feeling out of place in this opulent space. The salespeople, dressed impeccably, glanced at me with scrutinizing eyes. I didn't blame them. I didn't look like someone who could afford a $500,000 car. "Hello, sir. How can I assist you?" A young salesman, whose badge read Ethan, approached me. His tone was polite, but I could sense a hint of doubt in his eyes. "I'd like to see a Lamborghini," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Specifically a Huracan Evo, metallic silver." Ethan blinked, clearly surprised. "Huracan EVO, great choice. Would you like to see the display model or—" "I want to buy it," I interrupted, giving a slight smile. "If it's available, I'd like delivery as soon as possible." He led me to a Huracan Evo displayed on a rotating platform, its metallic silver paint catching the light, shimmering like liquid crystal. My heart pounded as I stood there. The car was more beautiful than I'd imagined. Powerful, sleek, as if it was born to command every gaze. I pictured my father behind the wheel, a rare smile on his face, and me, standing beside him, feeling for the first time like I was truly his son. "You're sure about this one?" Ethan asked, his tone now less doubtful and more enthusiastic. "This is a customized model. Alcantara leather interior, V10 engine, 640 horsepower. Starting price is $485,000, not including additional options." "I want it," I replied without hesitation. "But I have a special request. This car is a gift. I want it delivered to Houston, Texas on my father's birthday. And I want it to be a surprise." Ethan nodded, pulling out a notebook. "Great idea. We can arrange delivery in a sealed truck to keep it a secret until the last moment. Would you like to add anything to make it more dramatic? Like a curtain reveal or a light show when the car is unveiled?" I thought for a moment. I didn't want to go overboard, but I wanted the moment to be unforgettable. "I want the car delivered in a sealed container parked right in front of my father's house. When it's time to open the gift, I'll have the container open to reveal the car. But the key, I want to hand it to him myself. I'll wrap it in a small, simple gift box so no one suspects anything." Ethan smiled, clearly caught up in the idea. "Very classy. We can prepare a container with the Lamborghini logo and add some theatrical smoke when the doors open. What about the key? How do you want it wrapped?" "I want a small blue box because that's my father's favorite color," I said, recalling the times he wore his favorite blue dress shirt for special occasions. "Add a simple white ribbon. I don't want it too flashy. I want people to be surprised when they see the key but not think it's something big until the container opens." "Perfect," Ethan said, jotting down notes quickly. "We'll coordinate with the transport team to ensure the car arrives on time and at the right location. Would you like to include a card or a message?" I shook my head. "No card needed. I'll speak to my father myself when I hand him the key." Though in my heart I wasn't sure what I'd say. Maybe something simple like, "Dad, this is your dream. I did it." The process of buying the car took nearly a week to finalize. I transferred the largest sum of money I'd ever spent, watching my bank account dwindle rapidly. But I had no regrets. Every time I thought of my father's face when he saw the car, I felt every effort was worth it. I visited the dealership a few more times to check on the car, ensuring every detail was perfect. Ethan and his team worked professionally, even letting me test drive the car around the lot. The feeling of gripping the wheel, hearing the engine roar like a beast, made me understand why my father dreamed of it. But I didn't drive for long. This car wasn't mine. It was his. I left the dealership with the gift box in hand containing the glossy Lamborghini key, the gift I believed would surprise and make my father proud. The day I drove back to Houston, a light rain was falling. The endless highway stretched before me, raindrops sliding down the windshield like the tears I had swallowed 3 years ago. I didn't know what I was expecting. A hug from my mother, an apology from Michael, or simply a moment where I wasn't seen as the odd one out. I turned on the radio, trying to chase away the thoughts swelling inside me. An old Springsteen song played, singing about people leaving their hometowns to find themselves. I gave a faint smile. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. The family house in Houston looked exactly the same, as if time hadn't touched it. The white picket fence, the neatly trimmed lawn, and my mother's blooming rose bushes still adorned the front porch. But the atmosphere inside was different. As I stepped in, the lively chatter from the living room filled the air, mixed with music and the clinking of wine glasses. The place was packed with guests, neighbors, my parents' friends, my father's old business associates, and distant relatives I'd only met a handful of times. I stood at the door, clutching the gift box, feeling like a stranger stepping into someone else's world. "Justin!" A voice pulled me out of my thoughts. It was my mother. She stood in the corner of the room wearing an elegant silk dress, but her gaze held no warmth as it landed on me. "You actually came back?" "Yes," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I wanted to celebrate Dad's birthday." She nodded but said nothing more, turning away to continue her conversation with a guest. My father, standing in the middle of the crowd, looked as he always did, tall, hair now streaked with silver, his booming voice recounting tales from his days as a chief accountant. He glanced at me, gave a cursory nod, then returned to his story. No handshake, no smile. My heart felt heavy, but I pushed the feeling aside. "Today isn't about me," I told myself. "Today is about Dad." Michael and Sophia appeared soon after, like stars in a Hollywood movie. Michael, in an expensive suit, was talking about a major lawsuit in Dallas. Sophia, radiant with her golden hair, spoke about a complex surgery she'd recently performed. Lily, my youngest sister, was as dazzling as ever, surrounded by a group of friends from MIT, laughing and chatting animatedly. They looked at me, but their gazes were no different from my parents', a mix of curiosity and contempt. "Still selling toasters, Justin?" Michael asked, his tone painfully familiar. I just smiled, not responding. I didn't want to argue, didn't want them to drag me back into the pit of self-doubt. But Michael pressed on as if he couldn't stop. "Heard you moved somewhere, Florida, right? What do you do there? Sell TVs on the beach, must be fun." Lily's friends burst into laughter. I felt the heat rising to my face, but I held back, my hand tightening around the gift box in my pocket. Amid the stifling atmosphere, a warm hand rested on my shoulder. I turned around and my heart melted. It was my grandmother. She stood there, small and frail, her white hair like silk, her eyes lighting up as she looked at me. "Justin, my dear boy," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I've missed you so much." I hugged her, breathing in the familiar scent of her lavender perfume. My grandmother was the only person in the family who never judged me. Every summer when I was a child, I'd visit her in the countryside, running through fields and listening to her stories of the old days. She was my refuge, the only one who made me feel worthy. "I missed you too," I whispered, holding back the tears welling up. We sat down in a quiet corner of the room, away from the noisy crowd. She asked about my life in Florida, my job, and the days I'd been through. I told her not to brag, but because I wanted her to know I was okay. She held my hand, smiling. "You've always been a special child, Justin. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise." Then the gift opening ceremony began. The living room fell silent with only soft music playing from the speakers. A large table was set up in the corner, draped in a white silk cloth piled high with extravagant gifts. Boxes wrapped in shimmering paper tied with red ribbons or encased in intricately carved wooden cases. My father stood by the table, a proud smile on his face, reading out the names of each giver. From Michael, a 30-year-old Bordeaux wine. He opened the box, held up the bottle, and the room erupted in murmurs of admiration. Next was Sophia with a limited edition set of golf clubs, then Lily with an antique painting, each gift lavish, earning nods of approval from the guests. Then my father read my name, Justin Rivera, and the room suddenly went quiet. He picked up my tiny gift box, frowned, and let out a mocking laugh. "What's this, an hourglass? Or some toy from your electronics store?" Laughter filled the room, sharp like knives. He shook his head, tossed the box into a corner of the table without opening it, and moved on to the next gift, as if I didn't exist. I stood there, feeling like the world was collapsing beneath my feet. That small box carrying 3 years of my heart and effort was discarded like trash. I wanted to scream, to tell everyone I wasn't a failure, but I couldn't. I just stood there, frozen, my heart shattering into pieces. My grandmother, the only person in the room who truly saw me, gently touched my hand. "Are you okay, Justin?" she whispered, her eyes filled with concern. I nodded, but my forced smile didn't fool her sharp gaze. "You don't have to put up with this," she said, her voice soft but firm. I looked at her, wanting to say that I'd been enduring it my whole life. But I stayed silent because I knew this moment wasn't over yet. I walked to the table and picked up the small gift box my father had discarded. The room fell silent again, all eyes turning toward me. My father frowned, as if my presence was disrupting the festive atmosphere. "What are you doing, Justin?" he asked, his voice cold and tinged with irritation. "Trying to show off your little toy?" I didn't respond. I opened the gift box slowly, letting everyone see the gleaming Lamborghini key sparkling under the light. A murmur rippled through the room. Michael, my older brother, let out a loud laugh. "What's that? A toy key? Did you get it from your electronics store, Justin?" The laughter erupted again. From Sophia, from Lily, from relatives whose names I didn't bother to remember. They thought it was a joke, a desperate attempt by the toaster salesman to get attention. I said nothing. I didn't need to. I pulled out my phone and dialed the transport team I'd coordinated with the previous week. "Open the container," I said, my voice calm but resolute. Through the large living room window, people began to notice a massive truck parked in the front yard. The engine hummed, and the container doors slowly lowered. The yard's lights illuminated a metallic silver Lamborghini Huracan Evo, resplendent like a living dream. The crowd fell silent. The laughter stopped, replaced by whispers of astonishment. My father stood frozen, the wine bottle in his hand nearly slipping. My mother, always so composed, stood with her mouth agape, her eyes wide with disbelief. Michael and Sophia exchanged glances as if searching for a logical explanation. Lily, my youngest sister, whom I once thought I was closest to, whispered, "No way." The guests began to stir, some moving toward the door to get a better look. The car stood there, powerful and proud, the very dream my father had mentioned in the rare moments he let his heart show. I stepped into the center of the room, holding the key in my hand. I looked straight into my father's eyes, not with anger, but with a strange sense of relief. "This is my birthday gift to you, Dad," I said, my voice steady, unshaken. "You once said you wanted to drive a Lamborghini before you died. I saved for 3 years, gave up plenty of investment opportunities to make your dream come true. I hoped you'd like it, but it seems I was wrong." No one spoke. The room was enveloped in an awkward silence. My father looked at me, then at the car in the yard, then back at the key in my hand. I waited for an apology, a thank you, a nod, or even just a grateful glance, but he did nothing. He just stood there, motionless, as if he didn't know how to react. I turned to my grandmother. She smiled, her eyes shimmering with pride. "You did wonderfully, Justin. she said, her voice warm like an embrace. I nodded, feeling as though she was the only person in the room who truly understood me. Without another word, I walked to the door, opened the Lamborghini's door, and slid into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life as I pressed the gas, a powerful sound that seemed to tear through the bewildered stares fixed on me. I glanced at my grandmother one last time. She waved, her proud smile unwavering. Then I drove off, leaving behind the house, the family, and all the old scars. As the car glided through Houston's familiar streets, I felt a strange sense of liberation. I no longer needed their approval. I didn't need my father's proud gaze, my mother's apology, or my siblings' respect. This car, the gift I had poured my heart into preparing, wasn't to beg for their love. It was to prove to myself that I was capable of turning dreams into reality. Anyone's dreams. The roar of the engine on the highway was like a song of freedom, but inside, my emotions were a tangle of liberation and pain. I had done what I once thought impossible, faced my family, given my father the gift he had always dreamed of, and left with my head held high. But there was a vast emptiness in my chest. I wasn't sure if I had just won a victory or simply severed the last thread connecting me to them. That evening, as I sat lost in thought in a 5-star hotel room in downtown Houston, my phone screen lit up with Lily's name, my youngest sister, the one I once thought I was closest to in the family. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the answer button. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to block all contact as I had for the past 3 years. But another part, the weaker part, the part that still longed for a shred of family connection, made me press the button. "Justin?" Lily's voice trembled over the phone, lacking its usual confidence. Are you okay?" I gave a soft laugh, not out of joy, but because I didn't know how to respond. "I'm fine," I said, my voice even. "Why are you calling?" She was silent for a moment, as if searching for words. I want to apologize for what happened today, for how everyone treated you, and for how I treated you too." I didn't respond right away. I remembered Lily's glance when Michael mocked me, her faint smile when the room laughed at my gift box. But her voice now didn't sound like someone pretending. It was shaky, full of regret. "What happened after I left?" I asked, unsure if I really wanted to know. Lily took a deep breath. "After you drove off in that car, the room went dead silent. No one said anything for a few minutes. Dad just stood there staring out at the yard like he couldn't believe it was real. Mom was muttering something about how it couldn't possibly be Justin. Michael and Sophia started arguing, blaming each other for mocking you. The guests were buzzing, asking each other where you got the money for a car like that. Some even said they'd seen you on social media, that you're some kind of big deal in Florida or something." I gripped the steering wheel, feeling like my chest was being squeezed. "And then?" I asked, my voice lower. "When the guests left, the family sat down in the living room. Dad still didn't say anything, just stared at the spot where your gift box had been. Mom pulled out her phone and Googled your name, and then they saw." Lily's voice grew softer, as if she was holding back tears. "They saw your YouTube channel with hundreds of thousands of followers. The videos you made with real estate CEOs, the live streams analyzing the housing market, everyone saw them. No one could believe it." Michael kept muttering that it must be someone else. Sophia was silent, her face pale. And Dad just sat there, staring at the phone screen, not saying a word. I closed my eyes, letting Lily's words sink in. I pictured my family, the ones who had called me the one with no future, sitting around the table, confronted with the truth that I was no longer the failure they thought I was. But instead of feeling triumphant, I just felt empty. "So now they know," I said, my voice colder than I intended. "Now what, Lily? What do they want?" I don't know," she replied, her voice choked with emotion. "I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. I was wrong for not standing up for you. I always thought you were amazing, but I let Michael and everyone else drown that out. I just want to say, I'm proud of you, Justin." I stayed silent, Lily's apology was something I had once craved, but now it felt like a passing breeze. "Thank you, Lily," I said, unsure if I felt anything at all. "But I have to go." "Justin, wait," she called, but I had already hung up. I stared at the dark phone screen, feeling as though I had just closed a door. Not the door to my family, but the door to the old version of myself, the one who had hoped, who had waited for their approval. The next day, I drove the Lamborghini back to Orlando, leaving Houston and the memories I didn't want to revisit behind. In the days that followed, I tried to return to my normal routine. I went to the office, met with clients, filmed videos for my YouTube channel, and continued building my brand. But every time my phone buzzed, I flinched, fearing it was a message from my family. And then, as inevitable as a storm I couldn't avoid, it came. First was Michael, a short, formal message typical of the lawyer older brother. "Justin, I heard about what you're doing in Florida. Very impressive. Call me when you're free, let's talk." I stared at the message, my finger hovering over the screen, but I didn't reply. I knew Michael. He didn't care about me. He cared about the possibility that I could be a new opportunity for his network. I deleted the message. Sophia sent a long email, filled with flowery words about how she always believed in me, how she was proud of what I'd achieved. But I remembered her glance at the birthday party, the way she smirked when Michael mocked me. Her apology came too late, too insincere. I didn't respond. My mother was next. One morning, as I was sipping coffee in my office, my phone buzzed with a call from her. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding, but I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail, her voice trembling. "Justin, it's Mom. I want to talk to you. I'm so proud of you, honey. Please call me back." I listened to the message over and over, searching for a hint of sincerity in her voice. But all I heard was awkwardness, as if she was trying to fix a mistake she didn't truly understand. My father was the last. No text, no call, just a short email sent late one night. "Justin, I'm getting old. Come home. We need to talk." I read those lines over and over, searching for a trace of warmth, a hint of regret. But all I saw was a man trying to save face, not a father wanting to mend things with his son. I didn't reply to any of them. Not out of anger, but because I was tired. Tired of their belated words, their half-hearted attempts to pull me back to a place where I never belonged. I had spent 3 years building a new life, learning to love myself, and I didn't want the past to drag me back. But 3 weeks later, they showed up, right in front of me. No warning, no permission. I was in my office in Miami, a small but bright space with glass windows overlooking a bustling avenue, when my assistant knocked on the door. "Justin, some people are here to see you. They say they're your family." I felt the blood in my veins freeze. "Family?" I repeated, as if the word no longer held meaning for me. She nodded, her eyes curious. I took a deep breath, stood up, and straightened my shirt. "Let them in." The door opened and they walked in. My father, mother, Michael, Sophia, and even Lily. They stood there, dressed in their polished outfits, but unable to hide their awkwardness. My father, tall and stern as always, had heavy eyes as if carrying the weight of years. My mother, in her familiar silk dress, offered a strained smile, her hands clasped tightly to suppress her emotions. Michael and Sophia stood in the back, their gazes averted. Only Lily looked directly at me, her eyes red, as if she'd been crying before they arrived. "Justin," my mother spoke first, her voice trembling. "Are you okay?" I was so worried. I nodded, keeping my expression calm. "I'm fine. Why are you all here?" My father stepped forward, his voice low but lacking its usual coldness. "Justin, I want to talk. I was wrong. I didn't know what you've accomplished. I want to start over." I looked at him, the man who once called me an embarrassment, who tossed my gift box aside like trash. I wanted to believe him, to believe he was truly sorry. But I couldn't forget his mocking laugh in front of everyone at the party. "I poured everything I had into buying that car," I said, my voice steady but each word heavy. "I worked day and night, Gave up major opportunities just to give you the gift you dreamed of. All I wanted was for you to look at me with respect just once. But what did I get? A laugh, a toss of your hand, and your contempt. My mother burst into tears, covering her mouth with her hand. Justin, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I never imagined you could do those things. Didn't know, I repeated, my voice rising slightly. You didn't know because you never asked. None of you asked what I was doing, how I was living. You only knew how to mock me, to call me the toaster salesman. Now, when you see me online, see my success, you want to start over? It's too late. Michael stepped forward, trying to maintain his confident demeanor. Justin, don't misunderstand. I was just joking. I always thought you had potential. Potential? I cut him off, looking straight into his eyes. You called me a failure, Michael. You mocked me in front of the whole family. Don't pretend you cared. Lily, standing in the corner, finally spoke. Justin, I'm sorry. I know I was wrong. I should have stood by you from the start. I'm here because I truly want to fix things. You're my brother and I don't want to lose you. I looked at Lily and for the first time I felt a flicker of softness. She was the only one who called me right after the party, the only one who admitted her mistake without making excuses. But even she couldn't erase the scars my family had left on me. I don't need any of you anymore, I said, looking at each of them in turn. I spent my whole life waiting for your approval, but I realized something. I don't need it. I built my own life and I'll keep living it without you. My father stepped closer, placing a hand on my shoulder. Justin, I'm old. I don't want to lose my son. I stepped back, breaking free from his touch. You lost me a long time ago, I said, my voice cold. Not today, not at the party, but all those days you looked at me like I was a disgrace. I turned and opened the office door. Thank you for coming, but I have work to do. They left in silence without a word of protest. Lily gave me one last look, her eyes brimming with tears, but I said nothing. When the door closed, I sank into my chair, feeling as though I had just shed an enormous weight. I wasn't angry at them anymore, I simply didn't need them. After my family left the office, I sat in the quiet space with only the hum of the air conditioner and the Miami sunlight streaming through the glass. I looked out at the bustling avenue below, cars speeding by, people hurrying through their own lives. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free. Not free from my family, but free from the longing for their approval. I had spent too many years waiting for a proud glance from my father, an apology from my mother, or a hug from my siblings. But now I realized I didn't need those things to feel worthy. The Lamborghini, I decided to sell it. Not because I needed the money, but because I didn't want to keep something that reminded me of my naive hopes. I contacted the dealership in Orlando, and they found a buyer within just a few days. As the car was driven away, I watched from a distance, feeling like a chapter of my life was closing. I didn't keep the money from the sale. Instead, I invested it into a project I had been dreaming of for a long time. A training center for young people who had been rejected by their families, people like me who once felt they didn't belong anywhere. I wanted them to know they didn't need anyone's approval to succeed, that they could write their own stories. But there was another dream I wanted to fulfill, not for my father, not for my family, but for the one person in the house who never turned her back on me. My grandmother. She had always talked about her dream of owning a small farm in the countryside, where she could wake up each morning, watch pigs and chickens roam, and feel the peace of rural life. When I was a child, the summers spent at her house were my happiest memories. She taught me how to grow vegetables, care for chickens, and told stories of her youth with a warm smile. I wanted to give her that, not as a gift to prove anything, but simply because she deserved it. I found a farm in the outskirts of Texas near where she lived. It was a sprawling piece of land with a cozy wooden house, a clean barn, and a lush green field. I hired help and installed every convenience to ensure she could live comfortably. When I visited and took her to see it, her eyes lit up, as if she were reliving the dreams of her youth. Justin, You did this for me? She asked, her voice trembling. I held her hand and smiled. I want you to be happy the way you've always made me happy. In a YouTube video at the end of that year, I shared my story, not to boast, but to send a message to those struggling with toxic relationships. Be strong enough to walk away from what hurts you, no matter who it is. Family doesn't define you. You define yourself. That video went viral, watched by millions, and I received hundreds of messages from young people saying my story gave them the courage to move forward. What about you? Do you have a story to share? Let me know in the comments below.